Everyone, this is the Willington Board of Education meeting on Tuesday, August 13th, 2024. We are calling the meeting to order at 7 o'clock exactly on time. We will join us for the Pledge of Allegiance to begin our meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We are excited this evening to be kicking off our meeting with a presentation by UANM, the Facilities Study Follow-Up, and we have Rusty here, our trusted worker there to help us along. So, where do we?
So Rusty, I have all your presentations that I can share on screen, or you can drive. Which would you prefer?
Yeah, I could share. Basically, I would go through the presentation.
You are on, go for it.
Okay. So you should be seeing the PowerPoint.
Yes.
Okay. So what I'll do is go through some of this information rather quickly. We've presented this information before, so I'm not going to dwell on it. I think the more important part is later on in the presentation. But there are a couple of slides that I thought would be important to talk to you about. The scope is fairly, it hasn't changed. We're looking at both the schools and different ways of renovating them to bring them up to code and make them compliant, as well as maximize state reimbursement. So that's the process that we've been working with all along. We know that you have an enrollment projection that's pretty consistent. The high is 431, 25, 26. This is from earlier information that was provided to us. And what we want to make sure with that information is that whatever we do maximizes the reimbursement. And of course, the reimbursement rate will be, depending on when you apply for these grants, it'll be based on that at that time. So if it's 2024 or 2025, whenever you apply for it, whatever the going reimbursement rate will be, that's what you would calculate it towards. And that's where the enrollment is important. Now, keep in mind that as we do some of these projects, code-related items are not subject to space standards. So let's say as we develop a project and it's mostly code, we would be able to not have to comply with the space standards. Although we're very close, you do have older buildings that give you a bonus square footage, and so if necessary, we could you could also apply for state reimbursement. As we presented before, there's 6 major categories: the site, the building envelope, interiors, accessibility, and then the building systems, which includes, in this case, fire protection, because the buildings are not sprinklered, and then technology and security is the final one of the categories. So quite a while back, you had asked to look at a base project, and I think that we provided you some information on that base project, which talked about what's the minimum that you could do, or the base to each of the schools. And it was focused around HVAC and fire protection, bringing those up to in the current standards. Roof replacement, which basically is addressing, and then some of the building exterior walls, including some window replacement, as you want to do all that at the same time. And then some repair that would be necessary as a result of any project that you undertook. And of course, hazmat as you encounter it, would have to be addressed as well. So this was sort of the base scope that was established for the project, and then a while back, we had put a budget together for it. I'm going to skip these slides, which basically identify some of the work and the issues that we would be addressing. But this is a document that we sent you a while back, and the reason I'm going back to it, and this was for that base scope project that back in April, I believe, and this was looked at, we evaluated it. One change I want to point out is there's new legislation that's we think is going to be approved that increases contingencies. Apparently, a number of projects have been coming in high, and so the state doesn't really want to keep going back to the well. They want to make sure that when you apply for a project that you've got adequate contingency. So as I understand it, the owner's contingency, which we had at 5%, is going up to 10%. Final details I don't have right now. This is just what I understand is going to take place. And so with that in mind, I thought it'd be important to identify that and that the impact on, let's say, a project, the base project at center would be close to 300,000 when you look at the impact of the 5% to 10%. So what I've done since then is I know that you met and you had prioritized certain items in terms of what's a priority to you. And I think the way we approach it is that the base scope is what it would be phase one of any project that took place. And then I had a breakdown that had work that we thought should be done as a phase one project. And you looked at that, and I think at that time we called it a priority one project, and you evaluated that information and came back and said we can move certain items to phase two in terms of prioritization. So you did some of that work, and I got a copy of it. And so what you see before you is this document where the first column right here, I hope you can see my cursor, is that base scope project. And then next to it, what I'm doing is I'm saying this is the scope that we would recommend, and that would be, should be done as part of phase one. Now, the reason we're doing it this way is, these are some priorities that and work that may need to be done depending on, what that final discovery is for this particular project. And an example would be, we would need the fire service, the water for the fire service, for instance. I don't think that was identified, but we have it as phase one. And we have other items in here as well in terms of removal and replacement of oil tanks and things that make sense to do at one time. Now, that's not to say you have to do it. You can choose not to do it. It just means what I was trying to do is make sure that there's the least amount of rework that would occur around an area that some work that you're doing, and there's no repercussions from the HVAC part of it, and all of a sudden realize that, we do, because this is early in the process, you may discover that you do need to, replace that oil tank, whereas we go through approvals, they may say, no, that's something you need to do now. So what we did is we created the second column right here, which I'm refer to as, our recommendations in terms of what that phase one project is. Now, I admit that there's a lot of work in there, and so that's obviously something that you need to consider, in that should you be doing, do you want to do that? Can you financially, is that something that's acceptable to you? The next column over is what I'm calling the priority two or the phase two project. And what you'll see is I've highlighted some of this in sort of an orange, and those are the items that you had identified as you prefer to see those as the next phase or a phase two to work. With that in mind, the rest of it still would need to be done. So the way I'm treating this is if you do phase one, just like for the first column here, then this phase two would do some of the work that needed to be done that you may not have highlighted, but that needs to be done as part of phase two. And then there's two more columns. One is the phase two work that we would recommend. And then the final one is what I'm calling phase three or priority, the next priority, which means that that work could be done after the first two phases. Some of it could be integrated into any of the phases, or it could be done, a few years after the phase two projects are complete. So that's what I attempted to do, to try to get a better understanding of what's your priority, how do we achieve it, and what does that mean in terms of the total numbers. I don't think you're prepared to go into all of the details of each of these columns and line items, but what I do want to share with you is really what happens is when you do the base project, we're in essence, and this is center school, so the base project total budget is about 11.17 million. And the reimbursement, and with the reimbursement, your net cost is 6.55. I'm rounding numbers here. The way we looked at it is if you go with our recommendations, for instance, that net project is 17.2. And the reimbursement is about 9.9, and so the net cost to the town is 7.3. And what I try to do is put items together, and that's why this first phase is important, so that we can maximize reimbursement, and we don't end up having to, being questioned by the state saying, "Wait a minute, you." Because you broke this out of the scope of what your project was, you don't really qualify, or you get a reduced reimbursement for some of this other work. So I've tried to match the work in such a way that we can maximize reimbursement as we proceed with it. And it's difficult because I'm making some assumptions in terms of how that would be done. Ultimately, there would need to be meetings with the state to finalize how that could be structured. They may turn around and say, well, we'll give you the reimbursement for phase one, but some of the work in phase two, and if you do it in that fashion, you may get limited reimbursement. The main categories as I look at them is that the phase one work has more to do with the HVAC system, the roofs, the building envelope, so to speak, and the fire protection as you have it. I've added more to that in terms of egress and code requirements within the building to make it slightly safer. Understanding that we may deal with more hazmat as we go through the details of the project. So I've said, no, let's try to do the hazmat up front as well. And really the phase two work to some degree would be mostly site related, ADA related, and how to match the two. Like for instance, in the building, do you want to do a certain amount of renovation and let's say not put in the elevator for the for ADA compliance, and then come back and do that? Well, there's mechanical implications for that. There's some other implications and impacts for doing that at a later time. So I've tried to anticipate that and say, let's do that in phase one. and not in phase two. So that's the approach I've used, and what tends to happen is the base scope, as you've defined it as at 11.17 million, and I'm going at gross numbers here, it is lower than the 17.2 million. But then what happens is your phase two number is higher, and if we do phase one with just those basic requirements, the phase two number ends up being higher. And because you're deferring more work to phase two, now you have to put in a higher level of escalation. So the overall cost goes up. So the thinking here is, from that perspective, you want to do as much as you can with the first phase, so that you're not having to undo work when you go into phase two. And secondly, you reduce the amount of escalation that would be built into the fact that you're going to start that project a year or two later. Now, I've only said the phase two would start a year later. More than likely, it would be more than that, depending on how aggressive you are with the first phase project. So that's how I developed this information. I also, this first column here, which is where it says estimated cost, and it gives you a total value there. And that's the point there, is to say, a lot of the items that would be considered ineligible in a phased approach, if you were to approach it as one project upfront, as a renovator's new, for instance, you can maximize your reimbursements. I just wanted to show you that the net cost becomes, it's more attractive in terms of the net cost, but understanding that the total value of the project goes up, and that's more from a referendum point of view, in that you go for a referendum for a $29 million project, understanding that the net is to you is about 11.5, which would be less than if you did it in phases over multiple years. So that's how we developed this information, and I've done the same thing for both schools, and so I'm not going to repeat myself, and but that's the process we've undertaken. I will say that I added a slide at the end, and what I thought it would be good for you to see, and I'll send this out after this presentation, is what the sort of the combined totals. I took the sort of the last pages of each of the schools, which identify the total numbers, and you can see that the gross number for Center, for instance, is 29.3, and then the gross number for Hall is 44.2. Combined total of 73.5, and then the net to the town as one project, if that would be the case, is the 28.9. Otherwise, we would have the same calculations to say what the combined totals would be in a phased approach as well. So that's where we are, and just would like to get some feedback from you if you'd like to see something else broken out, or what are your thoughts in terms of moving this to the next step?
Well, I'll ask a quick question from you. Do either projects, either of the totals include swing space? Because if I'm looking at Center and you're considering where you have the estimated cost and you have every project down to 11.5 million, to do that, you wouldn't be able to do that without swing space, right? So
right.
Is there swing space on here at all, and how would we consider that if they were wanting to consider, even with the phased approach?
You're talking about relocation, right? Is that what that means?
Correct. Yeah, so some sort of swing space, because when you're gonna do projects over summer, that's one thing, your building's closed, right, to kids, you move your summer school someplace else. But when you're doing a lot of projects, it's, you know, we're talking January to December, we're talking a year, maybe not January, December, but you get my point. And I think there's a cost to that, and we would have to figure out the cost to the swing space and what that would look like.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's accurate. You know, I, you know, give an escalation between phases of 1 year. For instance, the base phase there's no you know, it's the normal escalation for a 1 year period. But then as we go to phase 2, it's a 2 year escalation period. But that assumes that you're going to do a bulk of that work in 1 year, or
Right.
if not all of it. And so that means there will be a phasing impact. Now, I don't have, I did, you know, include a value for the phasing, but it's really a function of how we approach the phasing. If you feel that, let's say that we need all these, you know, affordable classrooms at each of the schools, that's a different number than if we say, okay, we're gonna not have an art room, not have a, you know, the gym will be subdivided, and we can do certain things to help reduce the cost potentially. But there's an impact on education. So what we can do is I can do an analysis based on what sort of a schedule do you really want? Do you want it to be phase 1 to be over a year or 2 years, and then you know, so that you minimize impact and we come up with a phasing plan? Or do you feel that we just bring in portables and take large portions of the school and address them even during, so there's construction during the school year? So that's something that we'll have to factor in once I understand your approach and your thoughts on how you would like to phase it.
I noticed we've changed repairs to renovate as new. Is that something that sort of opens the door to a larger reimbursement rate, that renovate as new?
That's correct. When you do a renovate as new, you get some certain advantages to how, you know, the items are looked at, because in essence, you're bringing both these buildings to an as-new status. And which means that, you know, everything will have a life as a minimum life of 20 years, which they have criteria. And that way, items that would normally in a renovation project be ineligible for reimbursement they consider all those eligible. And what happens is when you do a renovation project, you're constantly being challenged later on, because when they do the audit, they're saying, well, no, wait a minute, we don't think this is applicable for a reimbursement. And this usually happens several years after the project is done. And even though we've got an understanding of what is considered eligible and what's not considered eligible, it can always be challenged. When you do a renovate as new project, then it's fairly clear, and that, you know, items that may be sort of on the fence in terms of people's perspective of whether they're eligible or not eligible are now considered eligible.
And swing space eligible for reimbursement?
Yes.
It is, okay.
Question. Rusty, on the bottom of our long, I don't know if he has a long sheet,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I want to tell you it is, it's our long sheet.
The totals for both suites, I believe.
Those are on those sides, right?
Yep, total project. Yeah.
Total project list. So at the very bottom, forgive me if this is a ridiculous question, but it says budget total. Do you see where I'm looking, budget total?
Are you in center or all?
The main
Doesn't
sheet?
the same question for both. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
So the budget, yes, I see what, when you say budget
So
total,
it
yeah.
says, just for an example, in this first column, I'm on center school.
Yeah.
It says 9,311,813.65. Then when you go down, it goes down. I don't understand that. So are you multiplying the, like, I don't know how you get the 17,802,090.
That's the grant.
That's right.
So-
There's your-
What
track.
happens is the budget total is the project cost. And then the 17 million and change is, there's a line in red, that's the
Yeah.
reimbursement. And then when
Okay.
you subtract that from the total, that's your net cost.
And so when we talk about the years out, we can't know, obviously, we can't know what's gonna happen at that point, but the costs will go up, and then you have escalation in here, you said, right?
So as we go years out,
Oh, I see, yeah,
there's an escalation factor in these numbers. And that's just, in this example or this budget, it's a 1-year escalation factor for the base case. 2 years for the, phase 2 work, and then if phase 3 work is done, it's just 3 years. So if that phase 2 work is delayed, then that number will go up. And the factor that I've used is a 5% escalation factor per year. So as the project gets pushed out or reduced in scope, and let's say you end up, at one point I was looking at 4 or 5 phases, the numbers keep going up because there's certain values that you have to add to each project. When I say each project, each phase, because if you're bidding it and you're bringing a contractor on board for each phase, every time the contractor mobilizes and demobilizes, there's additional costs, there's general conditions costs. So there's an impact cost-wise on each phase. Whereas if you did it one time, or let's say 2 phases, that cost is contained.
can I just ask one more question? So. I was trying to do this myself, but I'll just ask you, so then the total cost of all the phases for both schools. You would add up the bottom column on both of these sides of this page, and that's the total?
Wouldn't you add the budget totals for the total cost?
Yes.
So what will happen is if you, let's say, you said, we're gonna do the base project just as that's been defined. So that's a $20 million project with a net cost of 866. I'm looking at Center School, I'm sorry, Hall at this point. If that's easier for you, if I can go to Center if you want as well. But in that case, so that's phase 1. Matching that phase 1 is what I'm calling phase 2 Board of Ed. So you would add those 2 numbers together. So the base number would be 20 million for Hall in phase 1, 24.7 million in phase 2, and another 5.39 million in phase 3 to capture everything. And then what you'll see is that the reimbursement rates are not the same. They've all been they've got an ineligible factor that we've applied to each one of those.
Pushing it out kills it, Jen. It makes it so much more expensive.
I just added the 2 budget totals and we come up with 73,486,148, which is 13 million more than a new school bill.
How did you get that number?
I added the budget total, I added 44, 174,335 for all budget total. And I added that to
29 million.
29. Oh, I added, yeah, 29,311,813.66.
And that would be before,
Center,
before any reimbursement.
and there would be no swing space, so we would not have that cost because the kids could stay put while the new school was being built. And we probably get more reimbursement, Rusty, for new.
When
Is
you-
that,
Actually, when you build new, there was a 10% impact on the district for a new building. But what's been happening lately is a case had been made at the state level to say that doesn't make any sense because there are circumstances where it makes the most sense to build new. And so what we've been seeing happen is we're building new and not being impacted by that 10% hit to the reimbursement rate. But you have to go through a process with the state to review that.
okay, thank you.
I just want to point one thing out that I thought, this was part of our conversation, trying to go, how do we lump projects together? How do we ask Rusty and his team to look at this? And I think when you look at center school, this is the value of having them do this. If you look at center school in the second cost column, where we had that, the HVAC and the roof project, what we called, phase one. And it's $11 million and the net to the town was is it 6.5 or 6.9? Yeah, 6.5 million. But he added in the next column an additional $6 million worth of work. But it only cost the board, the town, an additional 800,000, something like that. So to the point of maximizing reimbursement and maximizing projects, I think those two columns, if I'm reading that right, Rusty, it's a lot more projects. And you're maximizing your reimbursement. So you would be, instead of 6.5 million, you'd be at center school, you'd be spending 7.3, but you'd be getting $17.2 million worth of work versus 11.1. Again, we talk about maximizing reimbursement and maximizing the number of projects. That has to be part of this conversation. And I think that is a great example of why you do a facility study, and that's something that we couldn't identify ourselves, so I'm happy to see that.
So is that combining phase one and phase two? Is that,
So he's made it, he's called it priority one QA&M recommendation. And anywhere there's a number in that column where we did not have, and Rusty, correct me if I'm wrong. Anywhere there's a number in that column where there's not a number in the HVAC column, that's an additional project that would get done.
That's correct.
And I mean, if you look at just the parking section, he's already maximized, there's, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of work there.
So I'm not gonna argue with you about the value of QA&M, but I mean, we didn't have this before. This is a lot more clear of a picture than what we got initially. We
Oh,
had
sure.
we had 5 phases out and we had basically had to guess ourselves. That's why I suggested that we do it and then compare. Like, I find this to be much more useful than what we got on the first go around. Because it does show the value of bulking things when you get the reimbursement for it. So
Yeah.
I'm not arguing there, but to be fair, this was not what we got.
Oh, agreed.
So.
Yeah.
but we also prioritize to create this. Is that true? Remember we?
Yeah, you've got your priorities in here, but he
That
also
was the
has
catalyst.
taken those.
No.
Yeah. For Rusty.
So just to verify, if we're looking at the phase one work by QA&M, and what they said, it encompasses the entire base project scope narrative here. That's what this would encompass, fire protection, HVAC, any electrical associated, the roof replacement. And then any issues with the walls, ceilings and hazmat, right? So when we look at. When we look at the phase one on this. So I'll go with the QAM column, if we look at the phase one. At the 17 million and the 9.8 and the reimbursement and the 7.3, that includes. Everything we're doing with the roofs, everything we're doing with HVAC, everything with the electrical, plus whatever QAM additional things they can lump in and get done, right? That's all phase one,
Correct.
okay. So making sure.
What he's called priority one QA&M recommendation.
Yep.
Yep,
Right, okay. This
that's
one.
accurate, Rusty, correct?
That's correct.
And would the same be true for the hall sheet?
Right, if you're comparing that HVAC, phase one column to the priority one QA&M recommendation, the same thing holds true there. So it's, the first column is 20.4 million worth of projects. The second column is 33.8 million worth of projects. The cost to the town in the first column is 8.6. The cost of the town in the second one is 13.2.
And would the phase one work be simultaneous at the two schools, so they would be doing the?
You'd have to figure that out. I mean, that's not impacted, Rusty, I don't think on here, right? It doesn't require the, your priority one for QAM recommendation does not require the work to occur at both center and hall. You're considering those two separate sites.
That's correct.
Yeah.
But now, keep in mind that if you decide you only want to do one school at a time, which might be an approach you would take, then each year you delay, you would add escalation to that project.
I have a question about lifespan, so. When we're talking about engaging in all of these projects for the school. I don't know if there's even right now an ability to like. Predict how much life is left in the school based on all of the projects that are needed to be done. As we go through this list, is there a way to. Kind of pinpoint or talk about how many more years we're gonna get out of our schools, given all these projects? I don't even know if that's the answer to the question.
So if I understand the question, you're saying, if you didn't do anything, what's life? How much life do you have
Well,
left?
Well, like, because, I mean, as a member of the board sitting here trying to figure out, this incredibly high number to fix the schools, I need to know for my own purposes, how much this is going to extend the life of our schools.
So if you were to go in the direction of a quote renovate as new, then at the end of the project, these buildings would be what we call as new. Now, this is purely facilities based. It's not educational based, right? And we all understand that we're not reconfiguring spaces within the building. We're just updating everything so that the program that is being offered within the schools is within those parameters of the existing spaces.
Yeah, I think some of the items you could just say, we don't have HVAC, meaning we don't have AC. You could just say it doesn't exist, whereas the roof, we both know the roof needs to be done ASAP, right? So some of those things we might have as part of just eyeballing the single pane windows at center school, they need to be done, right? They're aged. You could make those last longer by removing the caulk and redoing the caulk on them, but why would you do HVAC? So some of the things depend on something of another project, if that makes sense. Some would be very easy to identify, and some would be hard. I think you could leave a ceiling tile for a very long time. Right, but it depends on some of it, some of the items just depend on, is it aesthetic, is it, you know?
There's a
Functional.
big difference to me between repairs and fixing and this new specific term of renovate as new. And I understand like Anne's question was good. Does that give us more access to grants? And that's true. But that's not what we've been saying to the public. That's not what we've been saying to the group either. So that's kind of taking a hard left or right, if you ask me on the road here. It's a big difference, whether you're going to renovate as new or fix and repair. That's two different things to me. One is obviously way more intense. And I think Rusty's point about the physical space versus making an impact on the programming is a really important one. Because when the Board of Ed was originally asked for ed specs, things that they wanted to see in a new school, there were specific things on there about furniture. There were specific things about certain new like 21st century school program things. And I don't know if this would make way for that. Like we've said before, at Hall, there's lots of spaces that are kind of oddly shaped. They would just stay like that, I presume. And so that doesn't help you if you needed a space for some certain thing, you know, do you know what I'm saying? It's really just leaving it be, renovating it as to new as is, and it doesn't do anything to help us programmatically. And that's important, I think, to say, rather than just repair.
Rusty, can you clarify something for us? So the folks that have been on the school building committee, renovate to new was a term that was used with us where every single item was touched in the school. We know it wasn't going to be changing educational spaces, but every single item would be touched. Am I correct in thinking here that when you look at priority one QA&M recommendation, that column, all of those items would qualify under a renovate as new status for reimbursement? And then if we went back again and wanted to do the priority two QA&M recommendation 88 and building envelope, when you went back to do that second phase, all of those projects together would then qualify as renovate to new status with the same level of reimbursement.
So actually what happens is when you do a renovate as new project, they want you to do everything once. When you start breaking it apart, then they, they will not, you won't get a renovate as new status on that. So when you see these phased projects, I'm not counting an entire, the reimbursement rate has been modified because I'm trying to say, okay, certain things will be done, but others may not be done. And if it's in a condition where it's still got 5 or 8 years of life, for instance, we may not change it in that scenario. In a renovate as new scenario, if it's got that, even though it's got 5 to 8 years of life, you still have to change it because they want it to be as new. So when we break it down into phases, it's a different approach to how you calculate the reimbursement. So when you do that, it falls into what's called the renovation category, alterations, I should say. And then you have to be very careful about what work you're doing. Is it eligible? Is it not eligible? How do you manage it? So the other projects are all in that, would be, if you don't do it at one time, would be in the alterations category. But what I've tried to do is take those projects in such a way that I can group them into various eligible projects. And I will go back to the document that we looked at a while back. Right here, As you can
Yeah.
see, these red dots represent other types of projects. So what we would be doing in that case would be combining those into those other phases to maximize reimbursement.
So
It's-
really,
it's-
Rusty, when you look at estimated cost, that column, and you bring that all the way down, and you look at the net cost of the town, that is where you're maximizing your reimbursement. That is the renovate to new number. All of the columns to the right of that, and I'm looking at center school, the 11 million cost of the town, the 6, the 7, the 11, the 4. All of those, you're just lumping projects together to really maximize our reimbursement, but you are definitely being penalized because you're phasing during that time.
Yes,
That's a really important distinction, I think, the alterations and what that means, the renovated new, what that means. Fixing, improving, what repair, like whatever words we're gonna use, I almost want like a glossary because this is very complicated. And if I were just coming aboard because I know there's important things going on in my town and I need to participate, then it would be really helpful if that was all crystal clear when I started watching our meetings or attending our meetings, so. We might have to take this down like several notches to make it very clear and simple, so we can explain it to the public. Yes, that's what I'm worried about. I wanna make sure we
in
do.
the past, I have some definitions of each type of project, but that I can send you, so it'll help to clarify it. But the process is not simple, and that's why, I mean, it's, I wish I could say, oh, you just do this and, here's your reimbursement rate, and that's not gonna be the case. There's a list of ineligible items that's like 4 pages long that the state produces that come into play when you're either, if you're not a new project or not a renovated new project.
Rusty, you said swing space is eligible for reimbursement. Is that only on the renovate to new status, or would that be eligible to some sort of percentage under the other columns if you're phased in?
There are some eligible, there's some of it that's eligible. You just have to make a case with the state, so it has to be reviewed with them. They just don't want you going out there and bringing 30 portables on site and saying, okay, the state's gonna share in this. There's an approach that we have to work through and present to them as we look at the phasing.
Is pulling together information about the cost of swing space in a hypothetical situation something that's within the scope of your job and responsibility, Rusty?
Are you referring to like within our scope right now?
I guess where we are right now, that's gonna be a big question.
If we were to implement.
Right, and I think, some people are like, okay, so we put 20 little cubes out in the fields and we're good to go. But that's not the case. There are definitely rules, requirements, ADA things you have to think about. Other adults and personnel that need to be within a certain distance of particular children, et cetera, in and out to the bathroom, whatever, so.
You're
Thanks to
right,
my,
all that has to be considered when you
Yeah.
bring portable rooms and classrooms on site. I mean, believe it or not, but portable classrooms tend to be almost as expensive as building a new building. And so what
Right.
you're doing is you're gonna be putting these on site. You've got to do site work, you've got to have, connected from a power utilization point of view, you have to have, septic and sewer. It's fairly expensive, so what happens is the more complicated your swing space is, the higher the cost is, and the project cost goes up by that much.
Great. I think that's gonna be something we might hear from some of our townsfolk. Why can't you just get some swing space, move all of the students, completely do the building top to bottom and then move them back in? So I would like to have as much information about that to be able to share as possible because I feel it's my responsibility, our responsibility to know as much about this, we need to be armed with as much information from you as our expert as possible. That's why I'm asking.
And no, we can put something together that'll, put a phasing approach together. And maybe what we can do is do a phasing approach based on renovate is new, because even when you renovate is new, it's not that simple, because you have to find swing space. So it's a matter of how do you break up the building for a renovate is new project, because if you can imagine, you're going to be in the building and touching every part of the building. I mean, ideally, the cheapest version of a renovate is new approach is nobody's in the building, you renovate it all, you can get it done within 18 months and the kids move back in. Obviously, that's not, I mean, that's one approach, and the discussion may be, how can we fit students in one school, and sort of move kids into, let's say, a hall for a short period of time to build swing space and determine where they would go. So it's a detail that once we know what the approach is, we can get into a much more detailed approach to how that would be. So what I can do is I need a little bit of time to come up with a plan to show you, and what I would need is an understanding of how space is currently utilized, but also what's the level of sharing, so to speak, where you can say, okay, in order to make this work and minimize costs, we can bring the kids here, we can look at some spaces, and as I mentioned earlier on, maybe art doesn't have a room, or music, that there's certain compromises that some districts make. Other districts will say, no, we want all the programs, so portables are just going to have to be there. Or, I mean, in the case of a regional district that I'm working with, we worked out a plan where they were able to move the students into other schools on a temporary basis, and thereby eliminate the cost of all portable buildings. They were lucky enough to have space within the other schools, and so that's the approach that's being taken there.
I remember that the school building committee did have several discussions about that. Of course, I don't know off the top of my head what meeting that was at during their years of work. But if anybody's listening and wants to try to find those, maybe there's a way you can refer back to minutes or YouTube recordings and try and see if you can find those conversations. But yeah, all good things to talk about.
Couple other points, kind of going back to the new school versus the repairs. In that 60 million, we were going to have all new furniture, all new technology, new kitchens, new everything. And this 73 million price does not include that.
I do want to say, I'm doing one last.
I was just gonna,
Don't change it.
and I don't know if this is feasible, I think this might be silly, because I don't really, this is not my area of expertise, but Mansfield Consolidated Schools, so there are buildings that have not been sitting for very long, like Goodwin, it's not in our town, but would there ever be an option that we could rent Goodwin and move into that building, because it's already everything's done there. It's a little further distance to bus kids, but it's a building that's been used as a school and has all of the, or something like that. Would that be a feasible possibility?
I'm gonna say
One district to another or not?
possible, yes. You would really have to check with the townspeople and the parents and staff specifically and see how they feel about it, because those are the biggest stakeholders, I think, as far as that question is concerned. Willington has talked to nearby districts before about sharing spaces. So that's not new to have those conversations. The fact that those schools are empty now is new since the school building committee was disbanded or concluded, so. That's all now on our plate, I guess, and for me, the biggest answer is, yeah, possible, but really it will come down to our parents, our families.
Rusty, have you seen that before?
Right,
Yeah,
no,
we
it's just-
have, we have
Yeah.
looked at projects where the district rented some space and moved the students in there. You know, it's a more permanent building, and usually if it's a building that's somewhat conducive to education, that helps. So it's that is something that, I mean, certainly been in discussion on many projects. I've actually, many times we've looked at that. I think it's only one instance where they actually implemented that, because there's so many issues, we got to deal with not just food service, but security and all the other things that come along with a school building, that, you have to resolve all that prior and then make a commitment to lease that space for whatever period of time.
I just wanted to make a point going off of what you said, Phil, so. I understood what you said, but I did the estimated difference in reimbursement. And doing it in phases only cost about $750,000 more. And at these numbers, that's kind of a drop in the bucket, and that might be the way the town has to go. Because if I looked at the totals in the first column,
Mhm.
and then I added the totals, both base Q and Ms for the first two phases. Oh, I didn't include phases, it took a little bit more, but again, like, it's gonna have to depend on what the town wants to do, I mean,
Sure.
really.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be a better reimbursement rate, but if it's a more upfront cost that we can't do, like, it's
Yeah,
very tough.
Arthur, did you include increases every year the cost goes up?
That's all.
Okay, you included that, okay.
And there's further refinement that could be made to this information. I mean, there's just a lot of moving parts, but understanding the approach that you'd want to go with, then we can put more detail to it. And especially the phasing aspect of it as well. I mean, some of the critical components would be, are you planning on renovating both the buildings at one time? Because if the answer is no, then you're offsetting the escalation factor. And you have to consider that.
Okay, so are we at a point where our group needs to start making some decisions to questions like that?
Yeah, and I could put a list of questions together.
Thank you. I'm just
And-
trying to figure out like what's next.
So certainly, I mean, I'll try to keep it simple, put maybe somewhere between 5 and 10 questions together that are big picture type questions. And then take that information and see what we can develop.
At what point do we present this to the townspeople?
Thanks for that, James Rusty. So, I mean, we were aiming towards the end of September. Let everybody get back into the swing of school, and we're not in budget talks, but it's early enough on the CIP, start conversations. That's what Rusty and I have talked about. Brianna, one thing I think that's important in the public presentation piece of it is that the community weighs in on those questions.
For sure, yeah.
Because that's where, I think that's where they, talk about, and Jim Marshall's talked about this kind of vision of what do you want for your schools piece. I think that's what those questions get at. If they say, no, we're not interested in spending that amount of money to do both buildings at the same time, then you're getting more narrow in your scope, and you can, have some targets. And then you're determining, okay, which building is it? How much do you want to spend? What does a bond look like? Because there's other projects in town that are being considered that are gonna come into this big picture, and so I think some of those questions. I think you can share some thoughts, but I think the board weighing in heavily on those questions that he's gonna present prior to presentation to the community is a slippery slope.
I'm saying I can't answer those questions.
Yeah, I think,
Either, like, what do we need to start thinking about, what do we need to start getting information for, we can't speak for,
I think he could do that for us. I think
yeah.
in the preparation, I think the only outstanding thing right now that I've heard so far is the piece about swing space. That he could get some information on that, that would complete this so that there could be a public presentation. And the end of that public presentation really could be, here are your next questions, Willington, to consider. You see some pricing on here, you see some phasing, what's your appetite? And really, Rusty, you're talking about those questions are really, what's your appetite, right? Isn't that really what they were getting at?
Can that be a separate meeting specific for that purpose?
The presentation alone is not a Board of Ed meeting. It's a hall school type public presentation, and that is the only thing you would do that night.
We'll have to also clearly and carefully back up and explain to the people why we're back to asking them, what do you wanna do about the schools? Because they might be like, yeah, we told you to fix them.
Well, now we have prices.
But now,
And a plan.
we can just fix them, but if we use this renovate as new vocabulary, then it helps us with more dollars, so. That is all gonna have to be like carefully laid out and explained so that they have full picture, totally understand where we're at, where we're going, what we've been doing. And what we need of them now. Yeah.
So in what you just said to Brianna, did you say that we should not we should not answer those questions prior to the public?
That would be my recommendation, and the reason why is I think you need to hear public feedback before you because this is such a large thing, prior to starting to voice your thoughts. I think you can share them along the way as far as when you're getting to those conversations. It doesn't necessarily need to be the same night as Rusty's, maybe that people need to digest, and there's a second meeting that doesn't include QA&M, and it is feedback to the Board of Education. Because the target here is, what does your CIP plan look like for December? That is what you're trying to get at. What are you going to present to CIP as a plan to present to the public? That is what you're trying to do, so that you can accomplish the fixing of things. Does that make sense, Jen? I mean, I think it's, without hearing public feedback, it's hard to know what people will support, because the Board of Ed supported a brand new school or a brand new site with an auditorium. And it fell on its face, and it's not because it's something the Board of Ed did. I don't think it's something the SBC did. I think it was cost. So that's why I say the appetite here, we need to know what the appetite is. And people then it'll be clear for people. So if your appetite is X number of dollars, realize that these other projects are not going to happen. So you can't, say, are they ever gonna fix the windows? Are they ever going to fix? We don't have the funding for it. You can share those things. It just clears up what we do have and what we would have funding for.
And we remind them about what the last new school, the cost of that.
It can be part of it. I mean, I think the idea is that you have pricing now.
Yeah.
You have some phasing in, you have maximization of your reimbursement for whatever dollars you can get. But again, it comes back to money. That's, I think, what Arthur was saying before. It's nice that it's a little bit more money, but it's how much money can you bond?
Right.
And what will pass?
And
Because
what
if it
you
doesn't
get-
pass at 5 million,
And what you get for that money.
correct, but that's part of the presentation. I think that's where Rusty can lay out those things. And that was kind of my point before, is I've never been able to lay out, here are the 10 projects you should do together to maximize, because I don't have that expertise. I don't think the school building committee ever had that level. They just had Fryer's study with numbers, and that made it hard. And so this lays it out to go, okay, you wanna fix some of these items, here's what it's gonna look like. And know that, I think the other piece of this is that Rusty's point in the beginning of this is when you cross that $2 million threshold, that's new information for the town. We need to share that information, because when you cross that $2 million threshold at one building, you gotta bring a bunch of stuff up to the high performance standard. It's gonna cost more money. So, but again, I think the public presentation piece is the next big thing for QA&M to present out to the public. And you know, I think you could probably, Rusty, do you think in a month you would have, for the board, the piece on swing space and portables?
Yes, I can do that.
So if we had that, that would be the final piece of collection, unless there's something else that you're looking for. With the end goal, knowing that, I'm not sure, I think it's September 10th is our board meeting. That towards the end of that month, we would then have advertise a larger presentation. Really held by QA&M with the board members present, and to give this information and get it out into the hands of people and really explain it.
Phil, could you check with Mansfield about Goodwin, because that would probably be the least disruptive way to do it?
Yeah, I could, and just the challenge, I will, and I'm not, I don't want you to say that I'm discounting it, but it's an elementary school. Let's just be honest about that. It's an elementary school, it's not a middle school.
Yeah.
You talk about bathroom stalls, right? You talk about a lot of things, and it is an empty school that was left because it was at the end of its life. So I'm not saying it can't be done. I use caution in considering it, and we'd have to figure out what the cost would be to bring it into a standard to do it.
There too.
Yeah, I don't know what issues that building has or doesn't have.
It was just an idea.
No, I agree, and it was considered,
It's a good.
there were a lot of ideas that were considered about swing space. But a lot of them costed a lot of money, and Rusty was touching on that. You still have to have all the security standards, you still have to have all the communication, you still have all the bathroom capability, you still have to have, you know, the appropriate number of classrooms and space, so. I think it's worth looking into, to determine what shape that building is in. It's not. I can try to get that information, but,
It's probably similar to our center school, having taught there for 30 years.
Center School looked way better than Goodwin did when I was in Goodwin picking furniture out there.
Okay.
Really good. I know the Benton is being used as a.
Star program.
Yeah.
Mm.
I have two questions. One question, one comment. The first question is, can you remind me, someone, of the grant deadline for HVAC?
Nothing has been put out.
There's no deadline.
Rusty, have you seen a grant deadline for the next grant, HVAC grant?
No, I hear it's towards the end of the year, but I haven't seen anything.
It has been radio silence. We have not heard anything. We heard it was potentially gonna be summer. No communications out. And my gut is, they're waiting to see if people spend all of their ESSER money, their ARP ESSER money, to pull things back and stockpile, because it's the end of September that we have to spend it by. And anything that gets turned back to the state, I bet they will turn back into other grants to say, you got a project to go, we've got the money, because they don't want to turn back the money to the feds. That's my gut.
And then my other concern is, when I was listening to the July meeting, which I apologize for not being here, but and sometimes that happens, and then just past experience. So during the final presentations of the school building committee to the community, a lot of people came out and spoke, but it seems to me like a lot more people came out and voted who may not have been a part of those conversations. They could have been watching from home. They could have gotten information from other sources. When they voted down, for whatever reasons, a new bill. My concern is that only doing large presentations. It's the most feasible and it takes a lot of work. But, I remember going during a CABE conference to, or a Board of Ed conference, I don't know, is it the CABE conference? To a presentation from a town on the shore, I think, that had a building project fail at referendum numerous times. And, several things happened to finally go for it. One was that there was a united force where the Board of Ed, the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen, or their governing body, were working together to go out and do outreach in smaller groups in neighborhoods. Seems like a lot of work, but if there's some way we can maybe even go between that, between a large presentation to some smaller presentations where we're hitting targets or we're sending out information into people's homes, that's not just on a Zoom meeting on a certain night or on the computer that people have to find. Might be a better way, might be a way to help us to have everyone have the same information when it comes to a vote. Cause I have never seen in the 28 years I've lived here, a bigger vote than turned out for the school building vote. And I don't know that everybody had all the information when they were making that, or accurate information. Because there was a lot of word of mouth, it was just,
Sorry.
it was hard. And it was something we had not had to encounter in a really long time.
I wanna make sure, sorry, let me finish.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of other ways that we can, you know, if we could break up into like different people on the board, or a couple of us go. So it's not a meeting of the Board of Ed, but we're going out and talking to smaller groups or having, you had many presentations. We had many presentations 4 years ago. But every time we have to vote on a project, if it fails, we're already 4 years from the last time, and that was 4 years from when we started the conversation before you became superintendent. So and then every time the money just keeps, it gets more expensive. So the more we can do each time to get as much information out, I guess, that's what I'm saying. I don't know, not, you know,
What would be supported and what wouldn't.
and what people want, because we don't get everybody to come out and talk to us. We get certain voices, but we don't hear the whole community until it comes to a vote, and we don't know what those votes mean. I'm done.
I wanted to make sure to say that this is not a school building committee. We are the Board of Education. Part of our responsibility is to care for the facilities that our students and staff use for learning. We are lucky in the sense that a group of citizens has already done a lot of legwork in fairly recent years. And there is a lot to refer to and also learn from that group's work. And so that's a really good example of something to look back on, reflect on, and help us make better choices. Figure out how to touch base with our public is a really good example of that. I think SBC perhaps leaves a bit of a sour taste in some folks' mouths, so I want to make sure that I am saying that that is not us. We are not the school building committee. We are the Board of Education. Taking care of our facilities is part of what we do. And whatever groups we've been a part of in the past, or whatever experiences we have with that, needs to be set aside other than using it for knowledge-based expression. And luckily for everybody, our group's pretty good at having our own thoughts and feelings, but also prioritizing what is best for our children. So I know that will continue as we move forward. Okay, so Russ, you're gonna look into some swing space information for us. We're aiming for a public presentation of some sort at the end of September after our September 10th meeting. So hopefully we'll be able to touch on the swing space stuff at that meeting, maybe if it's ready. And then QA&M will be doing the presentation. And will you'll be there, do some kind of. Okay. Because there might be a precedent. The fact that Bill and you have worked with state representatives to try and bring to light our reimbursement rate and how that's a problem. Oh, the big bite, wonderful, because that's something that you're trying to do proactively to like help us move along. Okay, everybody's good. Rusty, do you need anything else from us?
No, I think I'm good.
Thank you very much for all of your hard work. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, Rusty.
Thank you. Okay. All right, agenda item 4 is present to speak. If you would like to share your thoughts with the, you can raise your hand physically or online. Just remember to please identify yourself by your name and address for the record, and you'll have about 5 minutes for your comments. We do have a time. Somewhere.
It's apps. You might have to click more.
In the interest of fairness, we'll wait until got that going.
Yep,
Right about that, so not.
slide over and then off. Yep.
Okay, anyone in the room interested in sharing? Present speak? Yes,
Peter Wiltintich, 97 Trask Road. Good evening. I want to comment tonight on your agenda item for evaluation of the school leadership. I would just comment that it seems for the past 3 or 4 years, the schools have been an overwhelming issue in town. And I think your task tonight is an important one. I hope it's deliberative, thoughtful, objective, and fair. And focuses on continuous improvement for our students in our school system. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, is there anybody online? Hello, anybody? Care to speak? Looks like no. Okay. It's there's a lot on our agenda this evening, to be totally honest. I'm sure y'all know that, but if you want to hang on till way at the end, we'll have another opportunity for President to speak, and we welcome you to join us then also. Okay, agenda item 5, chair report. As I just said, we have a whole lot to do, so I don't need to be taking up much of our time. Just, I was gonna suggest that, we keep an eye open for CADE emails and opportunities coming our way, especially this fall. There might be some really great things that we could find helpful individually or as a group. So just make sure you're getting those. If you're not, let myself or Phil know. We'll make sure you're receiving that, information. Okay, item 6 is communications. Do we have anything we need to do there?
You should have all gotten the email from Jim Marshall's. He took the time to go through the QA&M report and make comments and stuff. I think that was the only communication that came out.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks to Jim for doing that too, by the way.
Well, that's an, okay, let's keep a list of things we're lucky for. That's another one. Having, not just Jim, geez, I can't call him out like that, but having people in the community with expertise who are willing to put in their time and their help. So thank you. Okay, superintendent report.
Close these QA&M things. So the first thing on here is the enrollment. So the current enrollment at center school is for 24-25 is 204 and HMS is 168 for a total of 372. That does not include the 6 outplacements that we have this year. So the total is 378. I use the enrollment, the budget document to add these things in. So this is the 23 homerooms that we had. When we did the class size where we were at on January 17th of 24, the Prouda enrollment projections is next in the blue. And the number of homerooms is what we based our budget on for the 24-25. And that was the projected class size. So you can see that the projection 24, we currently have 22 for pre-K. This is a very small kindergarten class. And remember that we removed the kindergarten teacher because of that. So there's 22. That may change over the next few weeks because people do come out of the woodwork right before school. The projected of 37 for first grade, we have 42, 45 for second was the projection, we have 44. 37 for third, and we have 39. You can see it just goes right across. I think it's within exactly where we were projecting what we were gonna have and how you set your budget based upon the number of sections. So the drop here is really from through the, came from a couple things. One, you sent off a very large 8th grade class. And you took it in a very small kindergarten class. So as these groups go through again, you know, if you look at 4th grade where it's 2 sections. You're not gonna lose a section next year if you, at the center school, if you bring in another 2 sections, if that makes sense. But it just gives you a sense of, hey, it's August 13th, where are we at with enrollment? These numbers are gonna change over the next few weeks because people suddenly come in and register, or people say, hey, I'm moving out and requesting records. So just gives you a snapshot of what's there.
Just make a quick comment.
Yeah.
The kindergarten enrollment is likely affected by the new start age legislation.
It is.
So that means you might have a huge kindergarten class next year. Because the children who are fur babies or born after September 1st, they have to be held back in the pre-K setting. So now we have 2 classes of kindergarten fine, but next year we might really need to move.
You might have 3
Just because of that reason. Just want to say that.
Very good point. So summer school, it's held in each year to allow our identified students to continue to maintain their academic and social emotional growth and their skills that they would learn during the year. It was held at center school this year, and it was July 2nd to the 25th. It was held 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays for 3 hours from 8:30 to 11:30. We invited 52 students, that was pre-K through 7th grade. And they're recommended, whether it's through their PPT, planning and placement team meetings. Intervention teams also make recommendations, as does the attendance committees. If a student missed a whole ton of days for whatever reason, we invite them to summer school. So we invited 52, we had 37 students attend, which is decent. Obviously, our summer school staff works really hard to put on a good program that's engaging, that's fun. It is summer. And there's a focus on language arts and math and the social emotional learning piece. Obviously, this is not a requirement of staff to work. And so just huge thanks, because they're the dedicated staff members that come back in the summertime. They miss a bunch of their break because they work the majority of July to make this happen. So I'm just gonna let you know the names here because I think it's important to recognize them. Amanda Holden, Clary Pass, Stephanie Bergen, Deb Callahan, Katie Rishling, Nick Solano, Emily Nason, Michelle Tharp, Joanne Briggs, Ariana McCarthy, Maggie Almquist, Michelle White, Olivia Rovolino, Josh Look, Penny Farrington, and Brianna Knight. And that's all of our staff, whether it's teachers working in the office, paraprofessionals, social workers. Summer school doesn't happen without it. And if we can't host our own and it's still required to have through PPT, you'd pay a fortune to send them out to do it. So thanks for those folks for doing that. Much appreciation to you. The 24-25 convocation, oh yeah.
School.
Yeah.
Did we have students from Ashford come over?
Yeah, so they were not, we hosted space for Ashford. They didn't, I don't think they were really doing stuff together. It was just-
No, not that, but I just think it's important to call out that we were hosting space for another.
Yeah, so Ashford was having the roof done, and so we had an agreement done with them to allow them space just to come and host their summer school so they can have it. And that superintendent and I actually talked today, and I said, if we ever have a roof project in some summer, there might be some reciprocal, appreciation that would be happening there. The 24-25 convocations, the next item, that's really the start of school. You're all invited to that. It's the opening that we have. It's on Monday, August 26th. It's gonna be at Hall School. Breakfast is 7:30 to 8. And then we have really our opening staff ceremonies where everyone's there together from 8 to 9. I'll have the opening remarks. I'll kind of talk about the goals for the year and things like that. You're all invited to that. Just let Brenda or I know if you'll be attending. So we can make sure you have all the information for that. The after-school program, our numbers are growing there, which is great, so development is coming along. We have 48 students registered for the after-school program. Our hall school number has jumped up. We were at like 7 or 8, and we're now at 14. And we have 34 at center. Of the 48 students that we have registered, 8 of them are only those half professional development days. So we really have 40 students as of today, and I expect this number to jump, as of today, that are going to be expected that we're gonna see them a lot every day for after-school care. So, Hall School's number really is 13 because one of the 8 is there. And the center school number is 27 on a daily basis. So, as we get closer to school, I expect we're gonna see some more come in. We have handbooks for the staff that have been developed. We have handbooks for families. Letters have gone out to families for confirmation for entry into the program. And they've also received the handbook as well. And we're in our final stages of hiring staff for that, which is great. The director and I are really hoping for a good positive start, so we're looking forward to that.
Alright, I have a couple questions on that.
Sure.
So what's the max we have? We have 48 now. What's the,
We didn't set a max.
that upper limit?
It's as long as we can continue to get staff, we can keep going, and that's where if we're stuck at staff, we'll kind of shut it down. We are starting to allow part-timers come in because we can, within the staff that we expect to have, we can manage it. We have some counselors that are coming from high school and they're old enough to work, they've worked summer camp before, and so they wanna work 3 days a week, or they wanna work 1 day a week. We're basically creating a grid and inserting people. It also allows our paraprofessionals without hitting the overtime number. It allows them to also work the program 1 or 2 days a week if they want some additional hours and some additional pay. So we don't necessarily have a cap at this point in time until we say, we don't have any more staff members.
Okay, when you say part-timers, you mean part-time staff, part-time students attending?
Correct.
School?
Part-time students.
Part-time students.
So, the grant really has an expectation around full attendance. And so we put that out in our letters, we put that out in our handbooks. We're at the point now where we know we are confident in our staffing numbers that we can take, somebody wants to go 2 or 3 days a week, we can pull that in. We are, at this point, asking for the full tuition, like you were going 5 days a week. I say that because it's $2 a day, $3, $4 a day, or $10 a day per student, with a cap of $30 per day. So the fee, you can't get a babysitter for that amount of money. It is low. We're gonna try and work through with our families, if there's anybody that's part-time that can't afford that, we're gonna try and work through it. But that we are starting to allow part-timers come in. What we don't want to happen, because it affects our grant, is that someone that said, well, I was 5 days a week, now I only want 2. It affects our grant, because if we don't have the attendance, we will lose the grant.
Okay, so that segues 2 ways and other questions I have. So I was disappointed that we were charging families for this. My question is, where is that money going? Like, when you're charging now, are you putting it in a coffer for the future when the grant runs out, you keep it rolling? I'm not sure where this money's going.
It's a separate, so each school has their own program, and they'll have their own after-school program budget. It's basically outside of your Board of Ed budget. It is one account, it's audited out of the business office and the auditors. And any of those funds that come in are used to just keep the program going, whether it's because honestly, right now with the grant, the way we got it, we received 90,000 a year. We could potentially use all of that money in staffing and not have any money for supplies or any of the other items, things that we want to do for programming. It's kind of let's see where we are this year with funding to make sure. The reason, and this was something that came out of the grant folks, was to say, if you make it 100% free, people will say they're gonna be there every day and then not show up. So, the minimal fee of the $2 is the folks that qualify for free lunch. The $4 is the reduced lunch rate, and the $10 per day per student is if you don't qualify at all. So those monies will go into the account to then make sure that it's just on that specific program.
Okay. I hear what you're saying about part-timers paying the full-time tuition. I don't agree with that. If the money is going toward essentially supplies and things for the future and all that. I think we have a way to. I think if you ask a family if they're gonna do part-time and you ask them to commit to a certain amount of days. And they don't meet those days, I would say, okay, they should be charged for the days that they agreed to commit to.
Yeah.
I don't agree with charging a part-time family, however many there may be, full-time for days that they know they're not gonna be there. And we're not having a problem with funding the staff with the grant and everything. We're not having a money shortage in this situation
Now we know.
right now. I agree right now, but if you look at the potential, looking at the numbers, it's gonna keep itself rolling for quite a while. And if you're looking, so you got 48, let's say 45, 8 apiece, so 40, let's say 37 are full-time.
Mhm.
I mean, I have to break it down even more for this, so let's call 30 at $10 a day. At 5 days, that's 150.
You're assuming the maximum fee.
I'm assuming the maximum for only 75% of my assumed number, so I'm putting in some general boundaries on there. But I mean, again, the money's there, I don't agree with charging the part-time family.
The opposite of that is I'm going to have to say you can't attend the program at all. I'm making a commitment to say that if you're there. The other piece of that is the staffing piece.
Right.
So someone that comes, people want a job pretty much each day, right? You have to have the right number of staffing each day. That requires people to be there. And so when there's certain days where if you're only coming 2 or 3 days a week, I still need a staff member to be there on those days.
Right.
So
But
there's but the other days, that means I wouldn't bring that staff member in, I'm less likely to get that person. That staff member.
right, but that staff members, you don't have an influx of part-timers, is what I'm saying, as of right now.
No,
That staff member is gonna be there, 1 or 2 kids is really not gonna make, it's not gonna make it.
right now, and that's why we're living it, that's why the cost was put in very low.
Okay, I think it should be structured possibly for next year, or if we restructure it this year, or anything along those lines, is that if the families are gonna commit. And most of them commit to full-time, and we make that the expectation, but if there's a couple that commit to part-time, and they commit to a certain number of days. That they'd be charged for those days, and if they miss those days, then they're still charged. That's just my.
Yeah.
I have 2 questions. What is the number that you need to have to maintain the grant? The number of children?
We don't have that number.
There isn't a number.
No.
And the kids that are attending on the early closings only, will that continue to be free?
Yeah, those are the 8 kids. Well, they pay, it's the
Oh, they'll
same,
still
they'll
pay.
just pay for those days.
Okay,
So the only spot where we made them pay for just those days was the 8 students who are only coming on I think
Early
it's
closings.
whatever those early closings were.
Okay.
And there's no additional fee for the extra hours for the people that have committed to the program. So there's no extra cost. So instead of 2 hours at center school, which you're paying for 2 hours on those early closings, they're getting basically from 1:30 to 5:30, they're doubling their time, but there's no additional cost to it.
okay, that's good. Thank you.
Mhm. Anything else with that? Okay. The staffing,
Oh, I have one thing, sorry.
yeah,
Are we gonna be able to hear, what the plan is, like I'm still gonna say curriculum, I don't mean that, but like what it's going to look like, the after-school program? Like, it's Kelly, right?
she's building the program, yes.
I'd love to just get a sense of what the program is. I don't know if that's possible.
Mhm.
Maybe she can come and give us an update about how it's going somewhere like October, November.
Yeah, definitely. Some of that depends on funding.
Right, how it's going.
They ran a summer program this year at Hall School with the rec department and had programming, unbelievable programming every single week. I have a presentation to show you. I'm not gonna show you tonight because they want to make sure they have releases. They did a 7-minute video. They had skydiving, they had possum visits. That funding came out of this after-school grant because they wanted us to spend the money. We can't give them that money next year because it doesn't exist. But that same concept of making it a meaningful after-school program and not just childcare is the goal of this program. But you have to make sure you have the funding to do it. When you spend $500 to have the opossum folks come in, that comes out of the budget. Right, and so that is where, when we wrote the budget, we were double. We were in the 180 range for all the programming. We had transportation in there. Those things are not there right now, which is why the fee is there, because I gotta make sure that we're not gonna say, sorry, I can't afford to do this program anymore, or we're gonna run the program with 1 adult and 30 kids. There's no way I'm gonna advocate for that. So that's find the balance here. I've been told from the grant folks that if you get the numbers and you get the attendance, that you're more likely to get additional funding to be fully funded, then you can run more, but you have to have the numbers to do it. If you don't have the numbers, they're gonna go, well, you had 4 counselors, you had, 1 program director, 2 lead teachers. That's enough, you only need 60,000. That's where we need to make sure that we're finding balance, but we could easily have Kelly come in and go, hey, this is what it's looking like. And some of this is, we don't know what the budget looks like yet. On the kindergarten side, and the reason why this is a little strange is because the kindergarten students that are coming in, we don't know if they're qualified for free or reduced yet, or if they're full cost. So we're building a budget to go, okay, this is what is coming in. Of the 48 participants that are coming in, how many are free? How many are reduced rates, and how many are full cost? So that's why it matters to figure out who our clientele is first.
If you're worried about quality of programming, Kelly, who's the director of the after-school program, is the person who ran the summer school.
Yeah.
program. So, there could be possums.
Yeah,
Yeah, we've chatted a lot.
we had a lot of, the things that we ordered, so just as a really quick, kind of simple vision point. We ordered a lot of things like board games and outdoor toys, things like that. But we also, for the middle school, we ordered a cricket machine. And with the goal of having 1 day a week, I have a staff member who's like a cricket pro, doing some sort of cricket project that could be something that could turn into a club. And so just trying to do things like that are more hands-on and engaging, to draw more kids in. That's the goal. All right, can I keep cranking? All right, staffing. So we had 1 round of interviews for the facilities director position. We have an additional interview this Friday. Committee will kind of recommend next steps once we interview that person on Friday. I think the next step will either be, it'll probably be some sort of performance task for the candidates. Pull together a presentation, look at our QA&M stuff. What are your thoughts? How would you sell this to the community? Things like that. So that committee will build that and move to the next step. PE, HMS PE, the halftime position, we hired Victor Hertuck. He was the long-term sub for us this past spring, sorry. And so he was hired. I literally just today hired Patricia Johnson as the 0.6 music teacher. She's a veteran teacher coming out of Farmington, so we welcome her. And then I have an interview for a finalist for the staff support specialist position tomorrow. And so these are all things that have the teams that already gone through the stuff. I was away for a week, and so they're being finalized. So that is tomorrow. If that goes through, the only open position you'll have, knock on wood, would be the facilities person, which would be great because There's a lot of districts with holes right now.
Question,
Yes.
any more discussion on the 0.6.4 possible flip between art and music?
So we had some, real good conversations with, our teacher and looking at scheduling. From a scheduling standpoint, it was gonna blow everything up. And so to do that, and curriculum based, we said, let's take a year to look at it. And really, honestly, it's not a year, it's kind of 6 months. And pull together the whys, what that's gonna look like, for you. That would be a change in 2 positions, one we just hired, unless you left it alone and shared. But it would be something that would be into your next budget to figure out what that would look like. So just the scheduling piece alone, when Lisa and I started talking it through, and with the art teacher, it's not a small adjustment. I did not, my other was gonna be the slideshow from the rec department, human services. I'm gonna hold off on that until they have all their waivers signed.
Next, we're gonna look at the financial report on August.
Yeah. So this is the first financial report of the year. Obviously, we still have a lot of moving parts. You can see that CDS and HMS have funds for supplies and subscriptions that are still in the balance remaining. Really, we haven't applied any of the grants for the most part yet, so those come back into the budget totals. It does appear like CES has a boatload more money than HMS, but it's positions. So, the music position is in there, it's not encumbered yet. The staff support specialist position is in there, it's not encumbered yet. They do have a little more money in supplies simply because they were looking to buy really specific things that was those things were in the budget, like NGSS supplies for science. They had like $9,000, they had things like that will be encumbered and come out. Program 3, you can see that, the special ed doesn't have all the outplacements encumbered yet, and grant funds, all the grant funds haven't been applied yet. 4, 5, and 6 at this time, typical balances for this time of year. Nothing out of the ordinary. Program 7, all of the utilities were encumbered for the year. There's a little bit of a balance there, depending on the costs as the bills come in. Program 8 has the funding for the facilities director, which is why it's so high. So really, operations and maintenance is probably closer to $8,000, not $88,000. Program 9, we have not encumbered funds yet for the student school choice, student tuition. We have a variety of subscriptions that we haven't done yet. However, the biggest encumbrance that's already done is Novus, the IT, so that's already been done. And then program 10, the benefits and subs, will be where we really see where our budget's at. That is not reflected yet for new staff. So, if somebody new is coming in, do they take benefits? Do they waive benefits? Do they take family benefits? What does it look like? Donna will really do that once we hit September, October, and give us a good picture of where we're at in that particular line. Overall, right now, the budget's in typical standing, I think, for this time of year. Staffing wise, we seem to be relatively okay, with people moving in and out, things like that. Questions about that report?
Moving on to student activity accounts review.
Okay, so the first one, the student activity account, each school has one. It's reviewed by the business office, it's audited, it is outside your budget. This is a statutory piece, it's 10-237 school activity funds that it sets all the parameters for what you can spend funds on. It has to be basically for students, things like that. So we're transitioning these reports and the fund tracking into our financial software, into the Tyler. So I'm looking forward to that because it will make our life a lot easier on the business office and for myself for tracking these funds. Not that I'm worried about it, it's just easier to look at. The center schools account, which is the one that's there on the screen, It's typically smaller than halls and it is. They spent down some of their balance on student enrichment programming in 23-24. The assembly budget line is supported by an annual donation by the PTA. So sometimes if field trips cost less than what came in, sometimes there's an increase there. The accounts that you see in here is where like money for field trips, money goes in and out, donations, money goes in and out. Sometimes we'll get a donation and they say, we want you to use it for anything you want, it's open. Sometimes we get a donation that's specifically for a sport or for something for the library books, whatever it is. We use those in that's their specific way, whatever the donation says. And then you can see the book fair money comes in and out as well. They have a balance of 15,695 and it's to be utilized in those categories. One thing that we're looking at is some of the balances we've discovered as we've reconciled the accounts and they used to use Quicken, is that the bank actually had a little bit more money in it than they had in their statements. I'd rather have more money than less money. And so the business office has basically said, well, that's been that way for 4 years. Let's just match the bank statement. Now they've matched it up. And the 15,695 is the number they're now working off of. So when they put these categories into the business software, into the financial software, it's gonna match and we'll be able to see reports based upon those particular categories. Both schools have the same type of thing, this a little bit of extra money in there. The other piece that we learned this year is that they may have gotten checks late for something and late in June, and when they deposit them, they show up into our accounts in July. And you're gonna see that really in all schools here. Is that it looks like there's a negative balance for sports officials, there's not. That actually comes out of your budget, it's because we have to write a check for that official. Budget money went to those sports officials, but the depending on when the checks are cashed and when that transfer actually happens, that balance would be zero. So again, this is the Hall School account, they have different lines because of different needs. They received a large donation this year from Little League, as they went, they closed up, and you can see that right there, which is amazing. That is meant for softball and baseball stuff now, so that's how it's gonna be used. They have the Lions Club, sports, drama, they have the balance of 23,271. Again, that was at the end of June. This will be cleared up so that all of those checks next year now, because we're going to the financial software, everything will be done and allow us to see a good, clear picture at the end of the fiscal year, just like we would for the budget. The last thing I'll point out there is a DC trip, that DC line has a balance in there. That some of that funding was from the grant, the after school grant. We were allowed to put some money into that line. And those funds are going to be used for students that are gonna have a harder time paying for that trip. So we can offer it fairly and equitably, and anybody who wants to go can go, and we'll balance that out. So that's really what's there for those two reports. Sorry, I didn't scroll down. And then the bottom, the 196 and the 153 again, is just part of the reconciliation with the bank. Questions about either of the student activity funds?
Center's activity fund about 7,000 starting this year, less than it was last year. You concerned about that?
No, actually, I don't like that they're even that high. Typically, I like to see these accounts under 10. Or I wanna know why, and sorry, I can see that the column is not stretched over enough. Amy Redding brought in the author, that costs a lot of money, and she had been banking book fair money for years to get this author in, and she brought the author in, and it was thousands. So, that's the biggest change off of this one.
I just wanna make sure there's enough for whatever they.
Yeah. Some of the stuff like the Besby is the old soda machine money, it's still sitting there.
Okay. Next up, we're gonna move to some committee reports, starting with our policy committee. Two policies to discuss tonight. One about personally owned electronic mobile devices and the other about administering medication, especially Narcan. The policy committee has already discussed these things and is now bringing it to the full board for approval, correct?
Not the first one, it'll be just for a discussion point, and typically, we don't have these as discussions later on an agenda. Tonight, we happen to have both of these on. It was just to give you a chance to know that the policy committee met and that this is what they had reviewed and had conversations about. You're gonna hear a lot more when we get down to those policies. I don't know if you wanna have, anybody from the policy committee wants to add more at this point, but.
No, we're good.
Okay, so we're moving on to new business then. Sorry.
Yep, and now that's the policy, so. Policy 5141.213, administering medication emergency administration of naloxone. This is a new policy. It's in addition to policy 5141, administering medication. It's a new policy. This is your first read of this policy. And as you can imagine, naloxone is Narcan, if you don't know. And, you know, this is something that would be used in an overdose emergency. And this is really gonna be managed by our nurses. Storage, all of the, you know, knowing the stock, age and things like that. Our attorney did look through this policy. And since you've received it, I'm not sharing my screen, my apologies. Since you received it, Arthur, and it was ironic because this is exactly what she went to. We had a conversation about, should there be a minimum number of people that are trained? And she said, I would add administrator in there. So that there's a school nurse and an administrator. Those are people that would be trained at the minimum. The other individuals authorized by the superintendent, we're basically gonna open it up when we do the training to anybody on our staff that wants to be trained. It wouldn't be mandatory for those groups, but the school nurse and the administrator would be the mandatory too. I did also ask about kind of Good Samaritan policy. If you weren't trained and you, in good faith, thought someone was overdosing, and you administered this, are you covered? And she said, absolutely, you would be covered under. Doesn't even matter with your policy, it's law. And so what she said is make sure that's in your legal reference, and it's, you know, the work, it is in here. So the other piece that's, if you haven't had to take a look at this, I was a little floored, to be honest with you, when I saw this in other policies, when we compared them, but there is a refusal to permit the administration of this, of Narcan. A parent can refuse that. There's a process for that. They have to fill out this form and return it back to us. And it goes back to our doctors or, our school medical advisor or our nurses. So that is why that's there.
And that form is what prompted my question about Good Samaritan law and something like that, so that's why I asked.
So the Good Samaritan could not administer to
If they did not know, they could.
okay,
If it's a school member, just like, so I'll give you the example of, our nurses put together kind of an emergency student packet with allergies, things like that, like things. It's a confidential document, student picture on it, what the allergy is, what to do, things like that. That we can put those students on here as well. I don't know that we'd have too many.
okay.
I just want to say one thing about this before you can add your 2 cents on this or thoughts, or questions. I don't see this as an issue. With fentanyl or anything like that in our school district in pre-K to 8. I will say that. Folks coming into our building, this could be a community member, it could be a parent. Hartford had a situation where a student passed away because they ended up bringing something in school. That's why this policy. It's not that there's a drug problem. It is just in case, so we can have these things, the Narcan on site. And hopefully save a life if that were ever the case.
Will we know if that was ever administered?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So there's within the policy, they have to notify me, they have, I think it actually has a notification of the board as well. And I notify you when significant things happen, that to me would be a very significant thing.
I would think so, I just want
Yeah.
to make sure.
Yeah.
There's also inventory, yes,
Yeah,
so that has to be inventory ever changes, a bunch of people up.
Were the nurses asked any questions about this, like, are they comfortable having administrators and other staff?
they have
access
been
to this?
asking for a policy for Narcan for a while.
No. Other staff, I understand the nurses want it, and I agree they should have it,
Yeah,
what about other staff, are they okay with having other staff have access to it?
so part of the law, just like in AED, is it has to be accessible. So we have to track it, and one of the things, because like hall school is so big, they'll have one in the nurse's office, but they have to have one downstairs in the AED as well. It's alarmed, so we're gonna know if that's open. It's something that they don't really have a choice about. If they're going to have Narcan as part of a school piece, it has to be accessible to during community events, not just school-based thing.
Okay.
So
I-
that would be rec basketball.
It's gonna be there.
All of that.
Any other questions? This would be up for approval unless next meeting unless you have other things. But this, we can get this pretty quick. All right. I can go?
Yeah.
All right, so the next item is the cell phone policy discussion. I got an email today, Governor Lamont is supposed to be coming out with a press release. We've already gotten one notification about some sort of model policy, so that's kind of in addition to what the work that's already been done, but just want to let you know kind of where the policy committee is. The state is supposed to be bringing the model policy that they're developing to August 21st to the State Board of Education. No one has seen that model policy. We have not heard there's any dollars attached to it. I don't expect there to be dollars attached to it. We don't know if that model policy is just simply gonna say no cell phones in the school. We don't know yet. However, we had completed this survey, the cell phone survey in the spring. And the committee, the subcommittee, the policy committee reviewed this information on July 30th. And I'm gonna tell you, based upon the presentation, the data, I think it was suggested by Arthur, and I think it was a good suggestion, and was to bring it to the full board for conversation because of the feedback that was there. Before the policy committee starts working on a policy that you may or may not support, they thought it was good to have this conversation because it's very impactful. And the other part of that was, they had asked me to get some more information on yonder pouches. So I'm gonna fly through this, but this is the cell phone survey data. It's just to give you a sense of what the data said. So there were 39 teachers that responded, 15 from CES, 21 from HMS, 3 that were work at both. Do you find student cell phones to be a distraction in your classroom? No of 29. The majority of those were center school because the kids don't have cell phones in center school, okay? So I would say this comment right here, this was a comment that was directly taken from one of the surveys, and it matches really what was said. Students are trying to get on their cell phones, check their notifications across the board, across locations. It's an issue. Is there any educational reason the cell phone should be allowed in the classroom? 6 yes, no 32. The majority, they have Chromebooks, and the majority are saying no. Would you support a policy that banned, and that might be a strong word, the use of cell phones during class? The majority of staff said yes. Would you support a policy that bans cell phones during the school day? The majority of staff said yes. What areas would you support student cell phone use? 22 said nowhere. 10 of the other locations were like hallways, cafeteria, things like that, not classrooms, okay? Is there anything else you want to offer? Really general comments were made for and against cell phones. It wasn't anything earth shattering. If someone said yes, they were saying things like the yeses, classroom perspective was really like, I'd like them to be able to use their cameras to scan a QR code. It was a couple of real specific things like that, but overall, it was nothing earth shattering. The parent feedback was really strong. For us to get 177 responses, and some of those people have multiple children, that's a huge number of responses. So does your child have a cell phone? A lot said yes. I did not get into the second and third child here because it was just, you know, there's a lot, and I think that the data speaks for itself. Do they bring it to school? The majority of kids that have cell phones bring it to school. Is there a reason for them to have it in class? The majority said no, and the yeses of the 39s, the reason was for things that were really like, hey, clubs after school. They added comments that were tied to that, not during class comments. It was like, hey, if I need to send a comment about a pickup change, it was really something like that, a quick text. Or after school, I want to know when they're done with play rehearsal, things like that. It was not for classroom instruction. Is there anything else you would like to add regarding student cell phones in school? Again, comments were very similar to the prior question. Do you believe there's a reason for a child to have a cell phone in school? The yes 101, again, was not about the classroom activities. It was after school, my child's walking home, and we tried to capture that here. So I went through and tallied all of the survey, you're welcome. I tallied all the survey comments. So 54 people said for emergencies. Something's happening in the school, they wanted access to their child, they wanted to be able to contact them, okay? I put together cancellation schedule, general family communication. Hey, so-and-so won't be home when you get off the bus today, you're gonna be home alone. There were 29 of those. Multiple homes or joint custody issues of 2. Extracurricular activities was 23. There was a lot of people that said, when's the bus getting back from a soccer game? I wanna know. Bus rides, 3. The anxiety support, my child's having a tough day. I know I'm sending them to school having a tough day. I want them to be able to send me a quick text message, or I can send them a, hey, you're gonna keep it up, you're doing okay. There were some comments around that. 2 people said, I want my kid to be able to listen to music to drown out if they're doing independent work. And then the walk home or home alone, I wanna know when they get home, those comments. Based upon this, you see classroom on there? Okay, so where the committee really started to look at was, wow, based upon this feedback from staff and families, we probably ought to consider a policy that really limits cell phone use in particularly the middle school. So writing a policy to start with that's really tied to 5 through 8, where we see a lot more discipline issues, we see a lot more bullying issues, we see a lot more social media inappropriateness. We see a lot more disengagement because I'm checking my cell phone, things like that. So based upon that, I had a conversation with the folks from Yonder. And Yonder is a pouch. Let's see if we can get this to go. Of course, we're gonna get an ad for a minute. Nothing's free. There's no sound to this, but basically there is sound, but I'm not gonna play it. So that's a Yonder pouch. You put your phone in, you take that, you press that button and close it up, and it's locked, and they can't open it. It's just basically a mesh pouch. And to open the Yonder pouch, at the end of the day, the magnet is sitting there on the table. You put it over the top of it, you press the button, pops out, your pouch is open. Okay, so I wanted to give you a quick sense of, okay, what are we talking about with the Yonder pouch? Oh, did I just close my presentation? Sorry, give me a second. My fault.
They had a story about that, like on CBS Connecticut News one night about the Yonder pouches.
It's definitely, so I learned some things about Yonder pouches and like who their competition is or is not. And so I will share this information and what I learned now. Let me just move this up a little bit so you can see it. Go back and share my screen. So basically the way this works, I learned that Yonder is like, they have proprietary rights to this. And so they've done a very good job with their patents, and so there's not a lot of competition, which is why you hear Yonder and nobody else, okay? And so the way that they have this set up, and I met with an individual that's opened this in many schools, they're in thousands of schools, they're in a lot of schools in the Northeast, near us. These are their recommendations. You assign a pouch to a student, they are responsible for that pouch for bringing it to school. It is not, it's like you assign it, there's a spot for their name tag on it, they keep it, they take it home, they bring it back. Their recommendation is that it's not just about phones, that you're putting all of your smart technology, your Apple Watches, because you're gonna have the same problems where kids are gonna be messaging on their watches. AirPods, they all fit in the pouch. And what he said was, you put the tech on airplane mode and silent, and so that way it is truly off and away. If something rings, it goes to the office. So it's training. The locked, unlock via, they're locked and unlocked via that removable magnetic base. The thing that you just saw, where the magnet is, I'm like, hey, what stops the student from just going during the middle of the day? He goes, oh, no. The base plate stays and you just unscrew that and the magnet goes with you, so they can't go in the middle of the day and just unlock their phone. Like, perfect.
And I assume that just like a regular refrigerator magnet wouldn't do the trick.
I asked that question too, and he said,
Not
no.
that I have teenagers.
This is why they have proprietary information, because he said it's multiple magnets, they are geometrically placed. They're placed specifically, if you don't get the right magnet, it's not gonna open it.
Cool.
He's a salesman. I'm gonna look to John and say, is our kids opening their magnets in the high school and
Well, that comes down to if they are opening them, they're cutting them open and.
so you can cut them open, yeah,
Yeah, but then they charge the kid,
right.
so that's
So
something
they're
to
not
figure out.
opening them up using the magnets
Right.
because of the way it's working.
No, they're trying to buy magnets, like rare earth magnets, and they're not opening.
Yonder, and when I said proprietary information, the reason Yonder is working so hard is because they know as soon as the generic is on the Amazon marketplace, their product is done. Right, so they're worked really hard on that. He said you really have two options. You do an entrance to exit model, and that's the recommendation, which means you train students as soon as you come off the bus and you walk in that door. Your magnet is right there, your phone goes in, you close it up, and it's closed for the day. The second option, which is more costly and not recommended by them, is the homeroom to homeroom model. So you go to your homeroom, that's where their magnet would be, they do it there. He said, you're walking into school with your phone out, you have all the messaging capability, you have all of the camera capability. They do not recommend that, nor do I. I think if you're going to do this, it's entrance to exit model. And it takes away a couple things. One, I have a real issue with the communication in the hallways with discipline. With taking them to the bathroom, so just putting them in a pocket chart and a kid can take them out. This solves the instructional problem, but it also solves the issues in the hallways in the cafeteria. If it's entrance to exit.
We also have to think about if a student has two cell phones, they're putting a dummy cell phone in the pouch and their real phone is in their backpack.
Yeah,
That's
and he
a-
said that,
Yep.
and he said they'll have the secondary phone, anytime a phone comes out, it goes to the office. So. They were recommending the entrance to exit model, the cost, the $6,526. Comes with a best practice guide, you have access to how they've rolled things out, because that was a concern of mine. What does the training look like? You get 6 bases, which is more than enough for us, you get 210 pouches. They recommend a 15 to 20% overage, which is why it's 210. And that's for tears, cuts, replacements. So there's never a reason why someone couldn't have a replacement. And then you get access to an educational specialist, which sounds really fancy, but it's making sure how you're setting your policies and your procedures. Not necessarily your policy, but how it's implemented in the schools, it's done the right way. There's no annual fee. you buy the materials and off you go. The additional pouches are $30 each. So that is where, you know, you have, if you're gonna recite, if some are just nasty, you gotta buy new ones for the incoming grade. You could consider that a cost. Their recommendations, implementation after training and setting expectations. You don't have to start day one. He said we have successful implementation mid-year. It's about the time building up to it, saying off and away. If your phone is out, it goes to the office. Training everybody, once you have those expectations set, it's really easy to implement. And he said, based upon a number of middle school students, 6 spaces is plenty. They typically like 6 spaces for 300 students, so I think that's fine. If you forget your pouch or cell phones in the office, no loaners. And the reason for that was, it's just an easy way just to not have responsibility for that pouch. Your cell phone, your items just go to the office. If you lose it or you damage it, it's turned, you know, your cell phone is still turned to the office and you're building for the replacement. You could figure out if you wanna do a partial. If it was a loss, you could say, hey, I'm gonna charge you for half the cost. The second time you do it, it's $30 every time after that. And again, no loaners. So from the standpoint of, and by the way, they hadn't, the committee had not seen this information or heard this information yet. I think from the standpoint of the support that came through the survey, from parents and staff, I don't think this is out of reach. I think you have the funding and the REAP grant to cover the cost. I think we have the ability to write a solid middle school policy with implications for elementary as well. And then I think the administrative regulation could come across, which would allow us to adjust. That is not approved by you, but you would see those. And if something's not working, we can make an adjustment. But he said the clearer you make that expectation for students and staff, the easier it is. If you do the homeroom to homeroom model, you are opening up a lot of variability that he said it's hard to solve.
Did he suggest where the kids put this once, do they keep
They
it in
keep
their
it.
backpack?
It's theirs all day long, just like they would keep their cell phone.
And they're
So-
padded, they're pretty padded, so they
Yeah.
keep them safe.
Okay.
We do not have locks on our lockers, which is why locking it up in our lockers is not a good plan.
Okay.
He said, you also, if you take that, you're responsible for that product now. They are just putting it in a pouch and they keep it all day long. He said they want to keep it so it's close. The biggest concern from families was to be able to reach their children in a crisis or an emergency during the school day. He said you can tear this open with a house key. You could take a pair of scissors and cut it open. In an emergency, students would still have access to their cell phones.
Every classroom has scissors.
I don't know if any of the policy folks want to chime in, but
Do they, is there a place for names, or they just put their own names?
on the
them?
pouch, there's a spot for applying where you could put your name.
Perfect, so they don't get all mixed up.
So I'm just trying to, so they bring this pouch home with them and then they bring it back to school the next day?
They're assigned to it just like their Chromebook, but the Chromebook doesn't full pouch would.
And how do we know that they're putting the cell phone in the pouch? I'm trying to figure out all the loopholes.
We have supervision, so a couple things. One is there's a very clear consequence if their cell phone is out. It goes to the office, there's no question, that's gotta be in the administrative regs. There's no first time, first warning, your cell phone's out, your smartwatch is out, it goes to the office and a parent has to pick it up.
Oh, that's good.
That is just the clear expectation. The other part of that is at the door. We have people on bus duty and entry duty. So if you get dropped off, there's going to be a magnet right at the door for drop off at the middle school. That's where you would place it, and we have a staff member there already. Same thing at the buses. They all come in the same door at the buses, and he said based upon the number of kids, you put a couple of magnets down there, 2 or 3, and you just, off they go, and they set their routine, and it's a breeze. We'll have people that will test. We'll have fake cell phones. When they're out, it's gonna require a staff member at that point to turn it in. It's gonna go to the office.
So I'm all 100% for this, and I'm assuming that the outright, like. You are not allowed to have cell phones at school is because of the. Kind of group of people who were concerned about after school stuff and changing plans and things like that. Are we able to say, at least in the elementary school, there are no cell phones allowed?
That's your prerogative as a board policy.
I mean, it seems like if we're gonna set the tone that cell phones are not welcome in the middle school, it has to start. Somewhere, the concerns for the cell phones are not yet in elementary school, that seems a good place to start.
Yeah, they're often away in the elementary school. I don't think it's as big as an issue there.
No, I know, that's why it's kind of
but
looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's fewer cell phones, but
They're
again,
there.
that's the guidance that I think that the policy committee is looking for, like, what would you wanna do? And the no cell phone at school piece of this is that, at 2:30, if they're unlocked, they're gonna have their cell phones on the bus. We're still gonna have some issues for social media on the bus, because they have to unlock them.
And after school activities, I'm assuming.
After school activities, so
There's the bell ring.
there's a process that, before soccer practice, before basketball practice, afterwards, at 2:30, they're unlocked. And it's managed by the student at that point.
I think with this step forward, it will be more evident. The problem, the cell phone problems, like on the bus and after school, will be more evident than they are now, because now they just all mush into one thing, they just have their cell phones all the time and no one knows what's happening, but.
Yeah. We have ourselves in the after school program, no cell phones. Away. Not locked, in the other pouch, but away.
Away or it gets taken or away,
Or yelled at.
Same concept. Yeah.
I'm sure my kids would rather get yelled at than their phones taken away.
We have to.
Any other thoughts? I think the policy committee is kind of looking for marching orders, like, hey, if they draft a policy that, which I think could be done pretty quickly. That is around the purchase of yonder pouches. The other piece of this is, I can sign a contract tomorrow. If you're saying you're in support of doing something like this, I think you already have the staff support, you already have the family support. It's gonna take some education, it's gonna take some explanation. Do you want to do that, or do you wanna wait for the
Yes.
policy? What's the next step?
Is it starting this, could it start this year?
Yeah,
Yes,
so I think, realistically, in talking to him, I said, could you start school? He said, yes, but I wouldn't recommend it. You're too close right now. But he said, that's okay. He said, if you aim for something like an October 1 or following a long break, you've spent time training students what to do, that phones are away, like you set that expectation from the get-go. And that they go to the office if they're out. The phone goes to the office and they're out. That you set that expectation so that it's easier than you're just adding the pouch to it and then it's just
so I assume that would involve updating the handbook or something?
Yep.
Okay.
the administrative reg really goes to the handbook. It's like another layer. So when you think about policy, it's really state law drives first. Second is your board policy, which has to follow state law.
Mm.
And then under board policy could be an administrative regulation, which I write, and then handbooks. And that's where all of those things are really considered to be rules and regulations of how we operate the school district.
Would we be getting notification separately that this is pending or this is coming?
Oh, I would be doing some sort of outreach to families to say,
Okay,
the board has considered this is the direction they're going. I could do some educational Zooms, just to let people know what it is and what it's gonna look like. And that this would be a board policy. You could choose not to order yet. And you could take the policy at your September meeting, it would slow the process down, the timeline down, but you could give people an opening to go, oh, the board is gonna talk about this again at their September meeting. However, you already did a survey. You already have feedback from 179 people. You got a lot of input already. So I don't know that really makes sense. I think it more makes sense that you just simply say, this is the direction we're moving in, here's the information of how, what it's gonna look like and how we're gonna make it work.
2 questions. Do we have to make a motion tonight to have you purchase that, or can you just do it?
I'm under the assumption that if you're nodding your head going, we wanna do this, and that's how we're gonna write the policy, that I can order this. I don't think, you don't need a motion to do that tonight.
Okay.
I could just spend that money, knowing that if you come back and you don't approve the policy, I'm gonna have 210 yonder pouches that are gonna be sitting in my office.
And then the other question was, will they go from 5th grade to 8th grade and expect it to last that long? Are they getting new patches every year? What are our thoughts on that?
I don't know how long they'll last. The cost is not significant compared to the number of kids. We're talking about $1,000 a grade.
Right.
I think we'll have to wait and see how they last.
Mhm.
And, you know, if someone's pouch wears out because they had it from 5th to 7th grade and we have to replace it, that's not an issue.
Trying to rip it.
Yeah.
That's why I think they should turn them all in at the end of the year.
That's a good idea.
Oh, yeah, at the end of the year, for sure. Yeah, yes, for sure.
Throw them to a washing machine, clean them up.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say thank you to both the teachers and the parents, cause I know nobody watched the policy committee meetings. And the amount of responses, the amount of information that we got were very significant enough that we can bring this up to the entire board and say, this direction would not only be supported by the policy committee, but by the parents and by the teachers. So this is the way we wanna do it, but Phil did not have a meeting with the younger people until after our policy meeting, so we had no idea about cost or feasibility or anything like that. The cost, especially to be covered by grant, is good, so I think it would cost, which would be great. So, yeah, I'm in support of writing something along the lines of trying to go in that direction. And the other thing to remember too is we can get a policy written for the September meeting, but that's also the first read. It wouldn't get approved until October. So
Do we need to have that policy in place before we can implement the yonder pouches?
I would say so, yes.
Okay, that's what I thought too.
You can also do like a starter one, knowing, I mean, policy is a living thing, it's always changing, and we know that the state's gonna come up with some rules too, so it's very likely to need some editing along the way too, so maybe just start with what we agree upon, get that in the books so we can get going.
That's where the admin reg is the one that you wanna modify. You wanna have a good core, and they're out there already. There's good model policies already ready. And we'll see what the state puts out, if they put something out for us.
Mhm.
I don't think it's gonna take long to write it. It's the administrative reg, and this is what they really were weighing in on, the yonder folks, saying that the administrative reg is the implementation of what it looks like. It's the students knowing very clearly what's gonna happen if I have my cell phone out, if I have my AirPods out, if I have my smartwatch out, what's gonna happen? It's gonna be taken away, it's gonna go through, like, setting those things up and clearly, doesn't necessarily have to be in your policy. It's more in the administrative regs, because you may wanna adjust that.
And if we approved it at our next meeting and you did want to look at that October 1st start date, it would have been approved. Fine.
If you're gonna go that direction, I don't see an issue with that. I can sign a contract with them tomorrow and order them, get that process going, because there is an onboarding process. Just knowing that you're gonna approve a policy that, based upon the feedback that you have, that requires students to have their cell phones on airplane mode and silent and smartwatches from the entrance to exit. If that's where you're gonna go, I don't see an issue with it. And honestly, so your policies don't also, I probably could institute this without your approval. I don't think that would be smart, but because it's just like a disciplinary thing, right? You don't make those decisions around disciplinary things. We write things in the handbooks about student expectations. But when it comes down to like things like this and dress code, you're heavily involved, and we want to be very clear. What's not in the dress code is what happens when you violate the dress code, right? It's just about what applies. The admin reg or the decision of the administrator is what happens as an outcome if you violate the dress code. This would be no different.
Now, with you saying that, does that mean you could implement this sooner if you wanted to? And then we'll just catch up with the policy. If you felt it was.
I could, but I would want to make sure that we're spot on, like, I don't wanna implement something that
Okay.
you wanna change something. I think, the trust in the policy committee to do the work and get a good policy in front of you. I'm gonna have that information in advance of the full board looking at it for the first time.
Mm.
And I would work off of that to start establishing really what are the expectations when kids walk in the door this year. It's cell phones off and away. They're out, they go to the office, like I could do that tomorrow.
Mhm.
But we wanna give families notice of that, we wanna give kids notice of that. That takes a little time.
I'm good.
Thank you.
My kids didn't have cell phones, so they were very good, so.
Come on, like.
I will tell you that Ashford is already implementing not the yonder model, but the sell it away in pouches, and they've been doing it for 2 years, and she said big difference for them, big difference. So. Okay, I think I know, I hear you nodding your heads, or see you nodding your heads and hear your point, I will move forward with that. And I'll make sure we get the policy committee together sooner than later, so we can get that. And I'll give you an update if you might see it at the same time I do, if the governor comes out with a press release. He said he was talking to the superintendent, he hasn't talked to us yet, so. Thanks.
Okay, next, we're going to talk about or approve the regular meeting minutes from July 9th. I guess we have to make a motion and then we can discuss. We don't have to do that.
Motion to approve meeting minutes from July 9th.
Second.
2024, you're welcome.
Does anyone have any discussions about it?
If you've seen style changes in these minutes, we have a new person doing our minutes. Just an FYI.
It's not you.
Shoot, what did I say, man? I forgot about that until it just came up.
That's okay. Thank you to our new person.
Just somebody fill time for us.
Can we postpone the approval?
Yeah, sure, it's up to you.
How do we get out of this motion?
No, I'll, give me like, somebody, yeah, exactly. Perfect.
Just in
Oh, yes, I got it, found it. The vote for the teacher evaluation was incorrect. I abstained. It wasn't unanimous.
Okay,
Page number, please.
Page 9. Jen motion to approve, John seconded, all in favor, all were not in favor. 6 were in favor, 1 abstained. Motion carries.
So now we need to approve the minutes as
modified.
modified. Any other discussion? Right, okay. All in favor of approving these minutes as modified, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays or?
Abstain.
Thank you, Tracy. All right, we'll do it again. Anne, do you approve the minutes?
Yes.
Arthur,
Yes.
me, yes, Jennifer.
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Tracy. That's right, okay. Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Next we're moving to the Board of Education District Framework, which is posted on our website and something I need to review and update. It is attachment number 5.
So I did not, full screen maybe, I don't know.
Control plus.
Yeah, it's not very good though. I didn't get any feedback, so I'm assuming that, I mean, the majority of the stuff is pretty straightforward, it's still applied. I put draft on this, I changed the date to 24 to 27. If you want to do it as a 1-year goal and reflect on this, you could do 24, 25. You can do this however you want, but you should make a decision on this tonight, because this is something that we utilize for staff goals, and administrative goals. If you're gonna make changes.
Previous years, how long was the term for this?
So we've done 3-year commitments, and I think we did a 1-year extension of the framework last year, I think it was. And makes more sense to do a 3-year because typically, especially when you're writing in goals that are this broad,
Mhm.
it takes multiple years to make those things happen.
Did you get any feedback from the administrators or staff?
Not on this, no.
Works for them.
This is yours,
Right.
and then it goes to them and they build out how they're going to meet, how we'll meet those goals.
Okay, we will require a motion here.
I move to approve the Willington Board of Education District Framework 24 to 27.
I'll second it.
Any questions, comments, or discussion? Okay. Then we'll move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have approved our framework, moving on. It's something we could always go back to, right?
Absolutely.
Something popped up.
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Next is the review of breakfast and lunch prices. That's an annual discussion.
Yeah, you don't have to do it. So we had breakfast and lunch prices on the agenda. But I literally learned yesterday that we have qualified for all 3. Our rates are slightly over 30% for both schools. We will not get back as much money in reimbursements. But it's not significant, number 1, and number 2, it provides free breakfast and lunch for all of our kids. We still get some federal money back for each one that is sold. The other piece to this is that, our food service account is healthy. And so if you remember last year, we paid for the balance of the reduced cost. And we provided free for anybody that didn't qualify for free reduced. We still have over $200,000 in that account. So they have to, they're looking at, again, they keep adding things, smoothies, things like that. They're trying to look at healthier options. They're trying to look at farm to table and local things.
So great.
They'll continue to do that, but it's good to have a healthy balance. You all probably for the most part were not on the board when this, that $200,000 number was like a month to month to pay the bills, to pay salaries. It was under $9,000. Because it was supposed to be self-sustaining. All of this is COVID funds of what we got for lunches, and they've been doing a good job spending it because last year was closer to $300,000 by the end of the year.
So their salaries come out of that 200?
Salaries come out of this number, so that will be the next item on the agenda. But you don't have to do anything for breakfast or lunch prices this year because we've signed off on them free for everybody.
Great,
Yes,
show a thumbs up if you think free lunch and breakfast is awesome, and moving, okay,
Wait, hold on.
yes, sir.
Can we have, Stephanie come in at some point? and-
yeah, she's September.
Okay.
Yep, yeah, she was gonna do this weekend, they were away.
Got it. No, it's actually better to leave it there.
Yeah,
Okay.
did have a long agenda, yeah, she's booked for September and she already knows it.
That would be great.
Is she gonna bring us
families?
Ooh, I can ask her to increase, yeah.
I really liked how on one event night, parent back to school night, she had samples
She's trying to do that more and
Yeah.
more. Yeah.
of all the
Yeah.
some of the different meals, so it was great.
You want me to keep moving there, Brianna?
Yeah, sorry, I was just thinking about how, parents of picky students, and then they're always trying to find new things for their children to try, but if they try things at school and like it, the parents maybe won't know what that is or what brand or company, so that's helpful too. Reason why that's a good, idea. Okay, we have these awesome food service staff members, let's pay them.
Yeah, so you approve their pay because they're not in the union, their annuals. I'm just gonna tell you, I think you should match what the other groups have gotten, that 2.75%. That's what the non-certified staff union is receiving for 24-25. You have plenty of funds in that account. with, over $200,000, and then we still haven't gotten the June reimbursement money, so it's well over $200,000. And paying for lunches, it's still there. I think you give them the 275, I think they're doing a great job in trying to build that program. And trying some things that are different, which is great. So that would be my proposal to you.
2.75 is. Like, if you make $100,000 versus $15,000, 2.75 is much in my brain. Am I wrong? Am I thinking about this wrong?
So it's been the stat, this will be the last year, no, you're not wrong. It'll be the last year of the contracts that were at 275. What I will tell you, and I'm not saying not to go higher, I'm just giving you the facts. Because of minimum wage moving up, this group moved up in July of last year. Then they moved up again in January because minimum wage went up again. And this would be another one. Do I still think that it's from an hourly perspective, not a heck of a lot of money? I do.
How does it compare to other towns around us?
So it's comparable.
Okay.
For our size, it's comparable. The folks, where we have looked at this, when we get someone like Stephanie Knight as a new director, when she was hired, there are directors in other districts that are making a lot more money than her, have more experience. She's getting into a good range, in my opinion, for feeding the, under 400 kids that we have. I think they're doing an outstanding job. I wouldn't go under 275. I think that would be wrong.
I think 275 based on the fact that that's the same number as the other group, whatever you talked about.
Yeah, the union. If you consider that, I think, John, to answer your question in a little different manner, that union is negotiating now for 25-26. I think you should really consider continuing to match those amounts. To whatever it is. If it's higher than that, then you should consider it being higher than that.
Right, because if one union gets it, the other one's gonna go after it. I understand.
Right.
But that would start next year, once the.
This is the low, yes,
Yeah, this
that's
is
25,
the end
July,
of
correct, July
the
125.
contract.
This is, there's no way around it. This is the lowest group of paid employees if they're at the bottom of the scale. If they're a new employee, there are very few positions we have in district, very few, that are at minimum wage.
Is there a scale for them, or are they at minimum wage forever?
Good. Oh, no, they
The
get
food
bumped every,
service workers.
when you update this every year, they get the increase.
But they don't have a step system or anything like that.
No,
It's
stuff.
just minimum
Which,
wage plus. whatever.
Again, step is, if you look at the groups that have step in this district, they got step, which equaled 2.75%. Or they didn't move step and they got general wage increase, which was 2.75%. It's just how we've negotiated. I think for some of the negotiations that I've seen around, if it's higher than that amount, if someone got step and general wage increase, you still know what the percentage is for the increase, and that's what you would apply to this group, in my opinion.
Do we need a motion?
You do.
I move to, I don't know what I need to.
I'll make a motion to increase the food service staff pay in the amount of 2.75% for 24-25.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion needed? I like, John, what you had to say about paying our people.
I wanna pay more, but I'm
I
gonna
know,
say yes.
that
you
was a
know?
good question, and so when we're sitting around preparing for the July 1st. New contract next time, let's make sure that we really think about that. I mean, we don't have money falling from the sky, certainly, and we have lots of things to consider. But staff retention is really important, and showing appreciation for our staff is,
And these staff see every single student through the district.
they are much more important than just a chef behind the window for
Yeah.
sure. 100% agree.
I may be able to look at some creative ways to do like a special one-time something.
Mhm.
That is pay related, that can come out of this $200,000, that's to meet your comment.
Okay,
I can investigate
Yeah,
that.
maybe during
Thank you.
food service appreciation week.
Something that, you know, that still, because you have to make sure that you are following the guidelines of this food services account, the financial portion of it. If it's within a pay, it just could be like a one-time something like a, you know,
thank you for coming back to work.
Mhm.
And I hope that if there's a piece of equipment or something that they really need, or would make life a lot easier.
She's looking at a stove.
Yeah, like, let's just do that.
Do they have a POS system? Or anything like that? Okay, old,
no,
No,
oh, nice.
pretty.
Would the stove come
Okay.
out of the 200?
yes.
Okay.
How many staff members?
I wanna say 6, but I don't know if that's exactly right off the top of my head.
Generally is.
Okay, all in favor of increasing that pay wage, please say aye. All right, we will do that and look for other creative ways to, thank those folks and show our appreciation. Wow, look at that. Okay, we've made it to agenda item, oh no, yes,
Letter G.
letter G, yes, substitute pay. They're important too.
You approved the substitute page here as well, and I'm just gonna suggest that you maintain the current rate for, that was set for 23-24. I put this on here because I think you should have some discussion about it if you wanna raise it. I will tell you that it is comparable to what's around. There are some that are just off the charts. You don't have the budget for that because it's not budgeted. We've been doing okay. We've not been doing great. We've been doing okay with subs. Where I think you as a board have made a tremendous difference is in your staff support specialist positions. And that's the trade-off to this. So a retired substitute, if you're a certified teacher or retired teacher, it's $145 a day. If you have a bachelor's, it's $125. If you're a paraeducator substitute, it's $110. And then nurses would remain at $230. So that would be my proposal. If you want to change that, that's up to you. But that's what I'm suggesting to you.
Motion to approve substitute.
You don't even have to if you want to leave it alone.
Oh,
Although you might have made a motion for 23-24, you're probably right. You probably
sure,
should.
24, 25.
Yes.
Motion to approve, oh,
Go ahead.
to approve substitute pay for the years of 2024 and 2025.
I'll second that.
It's an empty motion. There's nothing to it. You're not comparing, you're. no-
Maintaining the same cost. Just maintain the same cost as
Prior
prior year.
Oh, to maintain the same cost as the prior year.
Hang on, let's start with it.
That's a good thing. Tracy, are you gonna still be willing to second that?
Yes, I said amended.
How's this, the nurse pay in comparison, because that was really tough, and our support specialists cannot do that. Yeah.
I have like 3 or 4 sub nurses. I don't want to say that too loud right now because we put out an ad. We got some folks from Indeed. Because I don't want other districts to steal them. We're doing okay.
I
The
revoke
money-
the question.
Money wise. It's okay. I don't want to go any higher because our nurses don't make that much more,
Okay,
and that's not right.
okay. Any other questions or comments? Great, all in favor, green sad? Aye. Moving on, thank y'all for that.
No old business unless you add something to the agenda.
Anyone have anything to add to the agenda? No, sufficient, or you want? Then we find ourselves at agenda item number 12, which is present to speak. Please raise your hand in person or online if you would like to speak up. No? Yeah.
I'll be brief, Peter Latinchich, 97 Trask Road. It was interesting to listen to your discussion tonight with OQ&M. I think I'm one of the townspeople after the referendum that thought we could move forward with some modest improvements to the schools that included maybe roofs and air conditioning. It does not appear your board is interested in that. Listening tonight, it sounds like you reconstituted yourselves as a school building committee. You have an architect. You now have a facilities manager that I heard will sell this plan you're seeking to present to the town in October. And I'm concerned about that. Because I thought at least roofs would be part of the plan. It doesn't seem like you think the way the community functioned in the past, where we completed projects, individual projects over an extended period of time, works anymore. Yet, we have a building at Hall School that's 100+ years old. Somebody did something because it's still here. Center School is 50+ years old and it's here. And we heard from Rusty that if we do what you feel is the solution, whether it's a like new rehabilitation or a new school, we'll achieve 20 years. Something doesn't add up there, folks, but I look forward to your presentation in October. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, we did. Okay. I'm sorry. Jamie, are you there?
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I'm Jamie Koprek. I'm at 79 Common Road. I actually just wanted to comment on the aftercare program. I really appreciate the opportunity for something like this, particularly because Kids Kingdom, I don't think, is accepting aftercare kids. However, I do feel as if there should be part-time rates for families that aren't using the program daily. I mean, I do think if you sign up for, say, 3 days and you are absent, you should absolutely have to pay for the days you missed. But in our circumstance, I'm fortunate enough to work from home 2 days a week. So my 2 kids would really only need 3 days of care. But since we don't qualify for free or reduced lunch, we would pay the full price of $50 a week per kid, even if they only go 3 days. And that's $160 a month that they wouldn't really be using. And to say like you can't get a babysitter that cheap, like that's absolutely right. But I still think it's morally wrong to say like your kids can come part-time at a full price cost when some people are getting the entire month of care for only $40. I think it's easy to say that $10 a day per child is great. Like I don't think anybody can argue that point. But if you have a family that's only using 3 days and paying $10 a day, that's $30 a week. But essentially, that $30 that family is paying is still $10 and $20 more a week than some families are paying for full-time care. So it's another one of those cases where there's really no choice and we'll have to pay the full price. It's just a little disappointing because, you know, $160 nowadays is a lot of money for something that we're not using. So it's just something I wanted to just put out there in the universe.
Thank you, Jamie. I see Mr. Stevens' pen moving. So.
It is.
Is there anyone else? Nada. Okay, thank you for participating. Okay, next is the superintendent evaluation process. To do that, our group will adjourn to executive session. Do we need a vote for that?
You need a motion.
Okay.
Second.
All right, so, oh yeah, it's right here. What it has to have. But prepared to do that.
I will move that we move into executive session to discuss Superintendent Stevens' evaluation.
Second. And you need to discuss that. Okay. And, we will invite Mr. Stevens in partway through to, discuss it with you. Thank you. Okay, Is everyone in favor? Great. So our group will move to executive session at 9:49 PM. We need to stop the. It is 11:09 PM. We are returning from executive session. We are just gonna take one moment to make sure our community members are.
Peter, sign off your phone.
Oh.
I don't need to. It's okay. Okay, upon returning from our executive session regarding Superintendent Stevens' performance evaluation and contract, we have a motion. I make a motion to extend the employment agreement for Superintendent Stevens as amended in executive session on August 13th, 2024, for the 2024 to 2027 time period. You will need a second. Second. Discussion. Okay, if you're in favor of this motion, please state aye. Oh, sorry. Anne?
Aye.
Arthur?
No.
Brianna, yes. Jen?
Aye.
John?
No.
Tracy?
Yes.
Four yeas. And only one absence, so the motion shall carry. Okay, thank you to the group for, our mutual collaborative work on that. And for Mr. Stevens for staying with us. Okay, item 14 is board comment. Was there anything anybody felt like we else haven't said here? Thank you to the summer school staff. That was my one thing. Anybody else?
Welcome the new staff.
And thank you for our agent staff.
Yeah.
Hopefully they felt the love tonight.
Thank you for hanging out.
Peter.
And thank you, Phil, for looking into an alternative too, maybe finding something for them.
Yeah.
The fashion.
I think it's important.
All right, we're ready for a motion for adjournment then.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Yeah.
In favor,
Hi.
turning at 11:11.